Welcome to Always True Crime, a podcast network bringing you gripping real-life stories that you won't be able to stop thinking about. Discover your next true crime obsession at alwaystruecrime.com.
If you're into true crime, not just the headlines, but the human stories behind them, join us at CrimeCon Birmingham, an intimate one-day event on April 25th, featuring in-depth sessions with investigators, creators, and the families impacted by crime. With just 200 attendees, you'll also share breakfast and lunch with the speakers, giving you the chance to spend time with the people shaping the world of true crime. CrimeCon Birmingham is partnered by the True Crime Channel. For 10% off, go to crimecon.co.uk and use the code Birmingham at checkout.
Andorra in the 1980s was beginning to experiment with tourism, capitalising on its magnificent mountain ranges and the lack of tax to make it the Alps without the price tag. This tiny European principality was opening its doors to skiers, cyclists and expats.
As often as she could, she had skiing lessons.
One of whom was Josephine Mills, now in her 60s and living perched high in the Andorran mountains.
There were a lot of stories about her skiing. She didn't really know how to stop. And one time they were skiing towards a cafe and there was a chap sitting on the ground having his coffee or whatever it was. And she slid on her skis and her ski went all the way up his trouser leg. And it was a story that's gone down in history for our family.
But this is a rare fond memory for Nicky Hibbin, Josephine's daughter, because although Josephine built a community of friends and volunteered with the church in her mountain home, her time in Andorra was missing one thing: the man she was waiting for. I'm Eugene Henderson, and this is Codename Badger, a story of secrecy, espionage, and control that spans a lifetime. Episode 5, John's Prayer. In 1987, Josephine moves alone to Andorra, content in the belief that she and John will finally be married.
She sold the house, she moved to Andorra. The minute she got to Andorra, he was there, knocking at the door of the bank, because she kept little diary records of when he was around and when he wrote to her. And there were little comments about the fact that there was no money or there was money or this or that. But basically, in Andorra, you can have one account in the bank, and you can take money out in sterling or in dollars or in pesetas or francs in those days, since become euros. I don't know how he appealed to her to give him the money, but he did. She would give him open checks. She would get the bank to give her an open check, which she then gave to him. And the bank manager and the tellers there got quite anxious for her because it was a very risky thing to do, to give an open check, which if she dropped it and someone had found it, then they could have the money.
By this time, Josephine is wealthy. She's inherited family money, but she doesn't spend it on herself.
She had that money invested. She herself had got very used to living on a shoestring. She wouldn't spend money on anything. She wouldn't ever spend money on parking a car. She wouldn't spend money on having a haircut. She wouldn't spend money on anything that she didn't have to. And so this money was just, in a way, sitting there. She didn't travel. If she went from Andorra to England, she would drive all the way without a stop. When we were children, we all went to boarding school, but the fees were paid for. She didn't pay any of the fees. And while we were away, she would buy scraps of bacon, which you could get for very, very little money, little bits of bacon, and that's what she ate. She ate carrots and that the whole time we were away at school. She was really, really hard on herself, and she, if she felt deprived, then she would deprive herself even more. She would just really, really hard on herself. And so it seems curious that she would write cheques for £20,000 and give them to John, just like that. It just seems so different from the way she treated herself.
But now, John isn't just the ex-spy who spent a lifetime dangling secrets and vague promises of marriage.
This is Father John Cattell.
The true Christian is one who is joined or united to Christ.
He's become an Episcopalian priest.
The Christian is one who, if you would, is kin to Christ. And he stretched forth his hand towards his disciples and said, "Behold, my mother and my brethren, for whosoever shall do the will of my Father which is in heaven."
This is hugely appealing to Josephine, who is devoutly religious. And in Andorra, her deeply held Christian beliefs have begun to get tied up with John himself.
She just felt God wanted her to look after him. And she became very, very religious. I mean, there were times when she would be seen to be asleep, sometimes sitting in the garden in a chair, and she seemed to be asleep. And I would say to Peter, "Oh, Mother's asleep." "No, I'm not," she said. "I'm having a conversation with Jesus." This is another thing she told Peter, that in Devon, they had been in a pub, she and John having a beer or whatever, and she had seen a halo on his head. And she believed that God was saying to her, "I want you to look after this man. This man must be protected." And she took it on from then, and that was in the late 50s. She just believed it. She wasn't going to be persuaded anything else.
He is Josephine's son, Andrew.
Whether he was ordained or I don't know, in truth, but he sent her messages about religion, prayed with her, and did all that complete religious experience with her. And that influenced her hugely. She was very religious. She felt a complete union with God. And he homed in on that. He used that all the way through, particularly, I think, in the Andorra phase.
John had been ordained, in a manner of speaking. In 1985, local newspaper The Tallahassee Democrat ran a half-page of bullet points breaking down John Cattell's claims in excruciating detail. Bullet point 7.
Cattell makes repeated claims while in Lexington to be an ordained Anglican priest, and he often wears clerical garb, but there is no record of his being an Anglican priest. Bishop Arthur Walmsley of Episcopal Diocese of Connecticut issued this statement to the Sunday Times: "Cattell has no connection with this diocese and we believe him to be a fraud." Cattell acknowledged to the Herald Leader on Saturday that he was really only a minister in the Universal Life Church Incorporated, a Modesto, California organization that will mail an ordination certificate to anyone who sends a fee.
But John could never be accused of lacking in hubris. This mail-order pastor, with a second-hand dog collar, even invented his own version of the Lord's Prayer.
Our Lord's Prayer, which is one of the prayers closest to my heart. But I have another version, which is, very briefly, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. And may we not be led...
Josephine is waiting for John, building a home she hopes they will eventually share. But John rarely visits. Mostly he's home in America, still working the luncheon circuit, his agent working hard to find him venues which either don't know or don't care about his expose. In 1988, he turns up at the Women's Luncheon Club in Oregon, where he meets wealthy widow Candace McNee. She's an event organiser and an author with grown-up children. By the following year, they're married. Of course, Josephine back in Andorra knows nothing of this. There's 3 women in this story who are still living with the legacy of John Cattell. Nikki, Josephine's daughter, who is fully immersed in finding every last skeleton in John Cattell's closet. Leonie, John's own daughter with Shirley. Leonie's unsure. She sees discrepancies in his story, but she's reluctant to believe he's nothing but a conman. And Candace, his widow.
I'm in touch with Candace.
Here's Leonie.
She will not have a bad word spoken about my father, and she's told me that she's refused to speak to Nikki, yourself, Andy.
Candace declined to speak to us for this podcast, but has always made it clear she believes every bit of John's story. But there's a mystery around his marriage to Candace too.
But I have been in touch with her recently because I need to prove that I've searched for the divorce. Because of the line of succession or something they need to see. So I'm in the throes of doing that. So far I haven't come up with anything.
Do you think your father could have married Candace without divorcing your mother?
I really don't know. I wouldn't like to say anything about that at the moment because from the information that I've obtained, I know that anybody can get a divorce in the States. You don't have to have been born there, or you just need to have been resident there for a while, which indeed he was. So I'm trying to find out of proof of that divorce from my mother in Lane County, which is where they were living in Eugene, Lane County, and now in California, because I didn't know that they were married in Piedmont, California until recently. I'm piecing together all the information.
America is a big place, and each state has its own divorce laws. On top of that, this was all pre-digital storage, so finding a divorce record is tricky if you're unsure when it happened and at which court. But like Leonie, we haven't been able to find any record of John's divorce from her mother, Shirley. Whether John divorced Shirley officially or not, he was certainly married to Candace, while Josephine waited for him in the mountains, none the wiser.
She would have been heartbroken, more than heartbroken, because she was expecting John to stay and get married.
Here's Nikki.
When he first arrived, he was sitting chatting to her and said to her, "Oh, by the way, Jo, if I mention the name Candy, it's my sister. I just don't want any confusion. And, you know, if the name comes into the conversation by chance, I'm talking about my sister." And at the time, I thought, I've never heard about John's sisters before. I didn't even know about his brothers. I've discovered since. But I thought, no, I don't think you would have had a sister called Candy somehow. But of course, I didn't say anything. I should have asked more, but he was telling Mother something and I was sort of earwigging a bit. So I thought, well, I won't say anything.
And while John juggled Candace and Josephine, his life was about to get even more complicated.
Hey, it's Tom from Always True Crime. We're going to get back to Codename Badger in just a minute, but I wanted to let you know that you can listen to the entire series right now on the Always True Crime Patreon. It's ad-free too. Plus, there's lots of exclusive bonus content from the show, including photos of John, Josephine, and Nikki over the years. Go to alwaystruecrime.com to join the Patreon community now.
Despite multiple newspaper reports exposing John, he's managed to hold on to one thing: his book deal. By 1990, he spent several years working on it with writer Arthur Gordon, and the finish line is in sight. Codename Badger is about to go to print. But just before cranking up the press, the publishers decide to enlist the help of a military expert just to give it the quick once-over. That expert was John Costello. He wasn't completely confident of UK military history, so he sought out a British intelligence expert and found Nigel West.
I was consulted by a friend who was a Cambridge historian called John Costello, and he had been passed the proofs of a book, I think it was called Operation Badger, and he had been asked by his publishers to read it, to give an opinion. And this was quite late on in the publishing process because contracts had been signed and the manuscript had been completed. And this was in galley-proof form. So it was within a few weeks of publication. And I think the publishers were HarperCollins. But John Costello didn't really have an expertise in this particular field, Second World War and SOE operations. And so he consulted me.
But how do you prove or disprove a classified mission?
There were no files in the HS series or the KV series at the Public Record Office. When I started my research, the Public Record Office was in Chancery Lane. A queue hadn't opened, and there were no files there relating to Special Operations Executive, the Security Service, or any of the other wartime intelligence agencies. All of that has happened quite recently, mainly as a consequence of two successive Directors General of MI5 who have been Cambridge history graduates who have realized very sensibly that the MI5 archive represents a staggering intellectual asset to this country, and that there's no justification for keeping these files secret in today's world. And so at that time, there was still a ban on anything relating to intelligence being released to the PRO, as it then was. It subsequently became the National Archives. But it was possible. In the case of SOE, there was a retired SIS officer called Gervais Cowell, who I knew quite well. And he was in charge of SOE's files that had been left with the Secret Intelligence Service. And so he was willing, at my request, to go and look in the files for me. And he said that we just don't have a file on this man. He couldn't have been in SOE. He certainly wasn't in the Netherlands section, which was pretty well documented in the files. And he was certainly never involved with F section, which was the principal French section, although there were 4 or 5 other French sections in SOE operating in occupied territory. That's how I realized that John Costello was a serious scoundrel when it came to his so-called war record.
My producer Andy and I spent over 2 hours with Nigel West, running through John's claims. His initiation.
Being dropped in the woods at night, armed with 2 knives, knowing a convicted murderer, also armed with 2 knives, was in the very same woods.
There is absolutely no chance of that happening in British or in any other jurisdiction. I cannot imagine the circumstances of that happening.
Meeting Churchill.
Just simply never happened.
In fact, in this instance, John was not only a liar, but a predictable one.
This is sheer fantasy, and it follows other people who have said similar things. And when you challenge somebody like this and says there is no evidence of any meeting, then they say, well, of course, it was so secret that there were no records kept, or that the records have been doctored. That's just simply not the way the intelligence community works.
His cover story of 6 months in prison following his arrest for stealing coins from a phone box.
Just fantasy. There is nothing, even in real life, that measures up to that narrative.
And his medals?
I mean, it's just nonsense.
Nigel didn't know all these things in 1990 when the proof of John's book came across his desk, but he was able to establish enough to send a message back to New York. Under no circumstances publish this book. This man is a fraud. HarperCollins didn't argue, and John's book deal was off. Thanks to Nikki, we have Josephine's diaries from her time in Andorra, although she writes in her own private code. John's visits are marked simply with a J, which is how we know that he was an infrequent visitor. In the back of her diary are his US bank details, written upside down in very small letters. As his book deal falls apart, John tells Josephine his health is failing him.
He invented endless illnesses. My mother kept notes of his contacts with her, and it was very often to tell her that he'd got something wrong, a heart valve, a knee that needed injection, or something that required money because he was living in America. He said he'd got no insurance, and I felt he was asking her for her to pay. Of course, I didn't know anything about it at the time. She sent money for a TENS machine at one stage, and various other things that he asked for, I think she funded. But basically the MS was, I think it's a condition that comes and goes, that you can get some improvement from, but there are times when it's really difficult.
Using John and Josephine's letters, we compiled a list of medical expenses he claimed he needed Josephine's help with. Monitoring equipment costing $600 to $800.
Acupuncture to arrest hemorrhage.
Treatment for arthritis.
They always require a cash payment.
Surgery on a faulty heart valve, $25,000. As Josephine was almost as secretive as John, we don't know which of these she paid, but we know he wrote in one letter,
Pain is easier to bear if it is an offering of love and devotion.
Amongst various ailments, John chose multiple sclerosis as his primary claim, a lifelong autoimmune disease with no cure.
He used to come into the kitchen to pour himself a vodka, and my mother always insisted to get the right vodka that he liked, so there was always vodka for him. And he would come, open the fridge door, get out the vodka and the ice, and suddenly stagger, as if he was about to fall, because he was trying to convince me he'd got MS and he wasn't coordinated in his movements. But it was so regular. Every time he went to get his vodka, he staggered at the fridge, and I just thought, you silly fool. I didn't say anything. I just knew he hadn't got MS. And the time that he got £20,000 from my mother that time, I saw him, he was going down the corridor. I was watching him as he went, and he jumped with both feet together, clicking one side and then the other side, as a child, or someone, who was physically able would do. And I thought, there's no way you've got MS. No way.
And the increasingly large sums of money exiting Josephine's bank account have caught the attention of her bank manager, who takes Nikki aside.
The bank manager said to us, did we know John Cattell? And we said yes. And she said, because he would come with her. He never came into the bank, but he would accompany her to the bank. She would come in and ask for big sums of money to be paid to the bearer on a cheque. He said to her, this isn't safe. If that cheque is dropped, anyone could take the money. He said, I'm very worried about you doing this. I don't think it's a very good idea. It's none of your business. She said, it's my business and it's not your business, to the bank manager.
By this point, it's the late 1990s, and Josephine has spent a decade in Andorra, waiting for her now 75-year-old spy to receive permission to marry her. But he has one more card up his sleeve.
First of all, he insisted she move to France because they would be closer to healthcare. Because she was in Andorra, she was way up a mountain and it was hard to get access to healthcare. He told her that he'd got MS, so she believed that that was a useful thing. She never admitted she had anything wrong with her, but she accepted that maybe they should be closer to healthcare, so she accepted moved to France.
So once again, the now elderly Josephine is on the move.
The estate agent, he said, I'm showing your mother and John Cattell round this house. I'm a bit concerned about your mother. Is she all right?
But it's here, as she grows increasingly confused, that the con that's lasted a lifetime comes to a head.
He just said, you're an old fraud. And John leapt up out of his chair.
That's next time on Codename Badger. This has been Codename Badger, an Audio Always production. Presented and produced by me, Eugene Henderson, and Andy Clark. Our executive producer is Ailsa Rochester. Sound designed by Craig Edmondson.
I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you want to listen to the entire series ad-free, it's available on the Always True Crime Patreon. You'll find exclusive bonus content on there too, and all our other true crime box sets. Go to alwaystruecrime.com to join the Patreon community. Want more true crime? This podcast and loads more are part of the Always True Crime Network. It's packed with box sets to binge and twisted tales you won't find anywhere else. Find your next podcast obsession at alwaystruecrime.com.